as you may know, we were hoping to be in person for our November 21st Sunday service, but with our numbers of COVID Delta transmission back into the very high threat level, we have gone back online. And so this is a pre-recorded service that was originally scheduled to be delivered in person. I just want to give a real quick shout out to everyone who participated, who changed their schedule and showed up on Saturday morning to record all of the pieces of this Thanksgiving service for you. And after we did all of that, we did discover that we had a technical difficulty. We were having some technical issues at the church today with our internet service. So the first portion is going to be now for something completely different, as I don't know if that was Monty Python or who said that, but we're going to play the video of the first portion of this service, and I am actually going to overdub the words that were said, not just my words, but the words of Leslie Blackburn, our worship associate, and of Rachel Holt Parker. So settle in, and this will just be a few minutes at the beginning of the service, and then the sound works for everything else. It's a lovely service with lots of good stuff in it. So thank you for joining us this morning. All right. This is the part where I introduced that we were back in the sanctuary, and part of what we're doing is we have a service called Welcoming the Stranger, and part of today's service we are introducing the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Guest at Your Table campaign. So thanks for joining us. The opening words are by Richard Folks. For the sun and the moon, which we did not create, for the moon and the evening, which we did not make, for food which we plant but do not grow, for friends and loved ones we have not earned and can never buy, for this gathered company which welcomes us as we are, from wherever we have come, for all our free churches that keep us human and encourage us in our quest for beauty, truth, and love, for all things which come to us as gifts of being from sources beyond ourselves, gifts of life and love and friendship, we lift up our hearts this day. And now, Leslie Blackburn. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. Leslie Blackburn, as you can see, is your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you are joining us today for the first time, or you've been a member or friend for many years, we are glad you are here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. And now, as Rachel Holt Parker comes forward, let us say together from our homes the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join with us as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another. And now to introduce our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Guest at Your Table campaign this year, Rachel Holt Parker, our new Acting Director of Youth Development, is going to help me with a reading called Litany of the Table. Rachel asks, why do we have a table here? And I respond, we have a table here because we believe in community, in what we have to give and to receive from one another. We are created to be fed in relationship, and the table is our symbol. She asks, why do we place a cloth on the table? And I answer, we have a cloth on the table because each life is interwoven with every other life. The cloth is our symbol of the love which binds us and covers us. Then she asks, why do we have a candle on the table? And I respond, we have a candle on the table because we believe in the warmth of passion, of faith, hope, and love. The candle flame is our symbol of the light and of our flaming chalice, which guides our search for truth. She asks, why do we place flowers on the table? We have flowers on the table so that we remember to see the mystery and beauty of creation, which continually surrounds us. Flowers are our symbol of the grace which springs into our lives. Then Rachel asks, why do we have an empty box or empty jar on the table? And I respond, the empty box or jar is to remind us to welcome unseen guests at our table, brothers and sisters who share our earth. The empty box or jar reminds us to give from our fullness to those who have need so that we may all know justice and peace. Then Rachel asks, why do we place bread on the table? The bread on the table is the gift of the earth. It speaks of the power of all growing things. It asks us to wait for the ripening and the harvest. Bread is our symbol of trust and faithfulness and all growing things. Why do we place water on the table? Water is purity and health. It is the gift of the sun and the winds and the earth. It asks us to cherish the rain and honor the storm. It is our reminder that our thirst will be quenched and our bodies made clean. The table is set. Let us now celebrate now with family, friends, and our church community of all ages and the world at large, knowing that this table is set for everyone around the world. May it remind us of how much we need one another, and may our gratitude always inspire us to share what we have with others who are in need. Thank you, Rachel. And now I invite you to settle into your seats and take a couple of deep breaths as we prepare for meditation words for this Thanksgiving holiday service. These words are adapted from a meditation prayer by Marianne Williamson, and it is addressed to the Native American Indians of our continent, the North American continent. I invite you to take a few deep breaths, and the meditation will be followed by a period of silence. To the nations of the Native American Indians, as a citizen of the United States, I say, please forgive me and please forgive us. On behalf of my ancestors and the group consciousness of all America, I deeply apologize for the wrongs so cruel that have been inflicted upon your peoples and for the suffering of your nations. If we could rewrite history, we would, but we cannot. And so we seek to make amends. May history begin again this Thanksgiving holiday season so that we can honor and embrace the spirit of all the Native American tribes and peoples. We want to bless and commit to the highest good of your children and all the children of future generations. May we begin anew. May the wrongs of the past be made right, that your nations be blessed, and that our nation may also be blessed. May it be so. Please join me in the silence.
The words for reflection today are lyrics by Isai Barnwell from the song called Would You Harbor Me, as performed by the African American women's a cappella group Sweet Honey in the Rock. Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a heretic, convict, or spy? Would you harbor a runaway woman or child, a poet, a prophet, a king? Would you harbor an exile or a refugee, person living with AIDS? Would you harbor a Tubman, a Garrett, a Truth, a fugitive, or a slave? Would you harbor a Haitian, Korean, or Czech, a lesbian, or a gay? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you? Would you harbor me? Would I harbor you?
Did you know that the native North American Indians actually celebrated a kind of Thanksgiving for centuries, for generations before the arrival of white colonists from Europe at Plymouth Rock? There is an Iroquois Thanksgiving address that dates back to 1450 BCE or even earlier. The Iroquois, as they were named by French colonists, called themselves the Haudenosaunee. Some of you may recall that the Iroquois were part of the League of Nations, first 5, then 6 Indian nations joined together and are known as the oldest living participatory democracy in human history. The Iroquois League of Nations and their practices of coming together actually inspired our nation's founders, the United States. Among them, Unitarian John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, along with Ben Franklin, to not only create a Declaration of Independence from British rule for the colonists, but also a few years later, the Iroquois League of Nations was influential in the creation of our own Constitution. Along with an Iroquois Thanksgiving prayer, there was an Indian tradition at the harvest time of the year before the winter to have what was called a giveaway. It was a time when extra food and clothing were shared with those in need. As Unitarian Universalists today, I actually love that we have our own Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's annual campaign called Guest at Your Table, starting just before Thanksgiving and then going through the winter holidays to wrap up in the early first weeks of January. Many of the American colonists who are our religious forebears were refugees from Europe looking for religious freedom. They were looking for the freedom to practice a new kind of Christianity that emerged with the Protestant Reformation, when the need for a special class of priests was challenged and direct access to the scriptures was achieved with the widespread publication of the Bible. These Christians, many of them Puritans and Pilgrims, were creating a new congregational form of religious community informed by democratic ideas. In fact, our own covenant tradition as Unitarian Universalists actually dates back to the Mayflower ship that arrived at Plymouth Rock, in a document that they created en route from Europe called the Mayflower Compact, which articulated a democratic vision of being in religious community. Those religious refugees believe that each of us has our own direct relationship with that which we consider divine, that we are always learning more, and that divine revelation is not sealed in any specific scripture. Instead, they believed knowledge of God and the world is being revealed in an ongoing way, in particular through the sharing of our religious search for truth and knowledge as individuals in community. Their argument, which is actually still very relevant today, is that we are stronger by sharing and learning from our diverse perspectives than we can be when only united by a common, predetermined, and imposed dogma. So that's a little history lesson you might not have related to Thanksgiving, but I have another one that may be a little bit more entertaining. So you know our American founders picked the majestic eagle to be our national bird. But it was Ben Franklin who actually really wanted it to be the turkey. He said that would be much more practical and down to earth. Our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee is now well over 75 years old. It was started in response to another kind of refugee crisis, the one that was happening in Europe during World War II, when Jewish people were being persecuted and displaced in mass numbers. In fact, the symbol of our flaming chalice was used as a seal for documents that helped people escape from Nazi Germany along a kind of underground railroad that we helped to establish. UUSC is a non-sectarian organization that is independent of our Unitarian Universalist Association, and it's funded entirely by individual donations, such as our guest at your table contributions. UUSC advances human rights and social justice in the United States and around the world, especially helping families with children to be free from oppression and violence, and to create opportunities to participate for economic self-stability and self-determination. UUSC not only helps to supply needed funds for specific geographical projects, they partner with local organizations who know the situation on the ground immediately and who provide grassroots leadership. Along with these important community development projects, UUSC also distributes aid in times of either crisis that is political or from climate change. This year's Guest at Your Table campaign theme is "Now is the time for courageous change." Individual donations that we collect in January begin about $25 to $40. But if you are able, or your family, to contribute $150, that amount will be matched with a donation from our UU congregation in Shelter Rock, New York. That's kind of a contemporary equivalent for them of the Iroquois giveaway from before the colonists arrived on these shores. As we enter this holiday season and all its pressures that we endure, from commercials to spend, it's important for us to take time to reflect on the deeper meanings of the season. For example, as we remember that original Thanksgiving story that we know from our childhoods, and despite current assumptions by many of us and misleading information in the history books that our children have in school, we know that Indians are still alive today. They are in much fewer numbers than when the refugees from Europe began arriving at Plymouth Rock. Today's Indians are still fighting for their homeland and their beautiful cultures. They welcomed the stranger into their land. They brought the stranger to their welcome table and shared the bounty of the earth with them in the form of a Thanksgiving meal. In this, a season of gratitude, especially gratitude for the many blessings we enjoy and too often take for granted, may we find a place at our table for the stranger in our midst. May we respond with compassion and generosity to those in need by sharing from the abundance that we know. Amen and blessed be.
Good morning. I'm Mark Lohr, a member of the congregation and the liaison really between the Social Action and Justice Committee and the church in terms of our choice of making Afghan resettlement in this Winchester area the major theme of the balance of our church year. A little bit of history, just that with the new administration and a change in refugee policy, a number of us in Winchester began to work from various churches on establishing a machinery and infrastructure for receiving refugees in our area. We were embarked on this in the spring with the Church World Service in the Harrisonburg office. When in the summertime, the Afghan evacuation suddenly exploded and something like 125,000 Afghan refugees were moved out of the country. The evacuation to this country was maybe 75,000, no one's quite sure, 80,000. About 5,000 of that number are coming to Virginia. It could be more. And of that 5,000, we're going to probably have several hundred in the Northern Valley. And of that number, we're looking at 100 or possibly more refugees in Winchester, depending on what kind of housing we can find. So we've been very busy creating a local infrastructure, working with the Church World Service. And in fact, Church World Service is going to establish a field office here in Winchester in the coming months. So there will be the machinery that we need to really grow our community in many important ways. Our church has been a leader, I think, over the years when this has been in discussion of bringing refugees here, not only to help the refugees, but also to help our own community to add to the richness of our community. So all of this is coming now to a head. We are going to have in all likelihood, have our first Afghan refugee arrivals this week. And they will hopefully be the first of a number that will be coming over the following weeks. This is why it's particularly timely that the Social Action Justice Committee considered this movement and decided to make this the theme for the balance of this year, our social justice theme. So you will have plenty of chances to help, certainly through donations this month when the when the Church World Service is the recipient of Share the Plate. But we will have, there are other ways you can donate money or furniture or other items or volunteer to help with the time that you have. So any questions on this? Talk to me. I have notices in the weekly newsletter, and there is a website that you can go into to sign on. Thank you.
As Rachel extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing our callous. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, Shenandoah.org. This will allow us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries which continue while we're not able to be physically together. We invite you to join our church community at noon at our virtual post-service gathering for joys and concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout groups. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSB email. Thank you for joining us today.
This Thanksgiving season, let us give thanks for the wonder of life that infuses all things now and forever. From the creative power of life and the bounty of the earth, we give thanks for the nourishing food that sustains us and helps us to sustain others. We give thanks for the creative power of community, so we might draw more often from the wellspring of gratitude, compassion, and kindness, much needed for making justice and peace in our hurting world today. Let us give thanks for the wonder of life that infuses all things now and forever. Thank you so much for joining us today during another season that is very challenging. We're so grateful that we have a community to share these difficult times with and to help sustain each other. Stay safe, stay strong, and we'll see you next time.